The rain in Seoul didn't fall that night. It hurled itself against the penthouse windows like it was trying to break in, trying to warn her. Imani Blackwood stood barefoot on the imported walnut floor of a bedroom that wasn't hers, in a silk robe that cost more than 3 months of her old rent, holding a bank statement that shouldn't exist. The number at the top had 13 digits. Her name was on it. Her name, Imani Devereaux Blackwood, spelled correctly, middle name and all, attached to an account she had never opened, in a country whose language she was still learning to read. Behind her, the bedroom door opened without a sound. She didn't turn. She knew the weight of his footsteps by now. 30 nights of learning them. 30 mornings of pretending she hadn't. Seong-jae. Her voice cracked around his name. What is this? Kang Seong-jae stepped into the lamplight. Black shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a fresh cut across his knuckles that hadn't been there at breakfast. He looked at the paper in her hand the way other men look at a loaded gun, with the calm of someone who already knew where it was aimed. That, he said quietly, is the price of your freedom, or the beginning of it. You put $12 million in my name. I put what you're worth in your name. Our contract ends tomorrow. I know. So I go home. That was the deal. 30 days, no questions, no strings. He crossed the room slowly, stopping close enough that she could smell the rain on him and the faint metallic edge of whatever had opened his knuckles. Imani. He said her name the way he'd said it every night that week, like it was something he was still learning to deserve. Tomorrow is day 31, and I'm not asking you to stay. I'm asking you to name your price. Anything. Whatever number keeps you here, name it. The rain hit the glass harder. But to understand how a 29-year-old woman from West Baltimore ended up in a Gangnam penthouse, being offered a blank check by one of the most dangerous men in Korea, we need to go back. This story is for every woman who ever shrank herself to fit inside somebody else's version of love. Every woman who paid the rent, paid the tuition, paid the emotional tax, and still got called ungrateful when the invoice came due. Every woman who was told her softness was a weakness, right up until somebody powerful looked at her and saw it as the rarest thing in the room. The question I want you to hold on to is this. What happens to a woman when, for the first time in her life, somebody asks her what she wants, and actually waits for the answer? If you've ever been that woman, or you're becoming her, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button and drop the word worthy in the comments so I know you're here, because Imani's about to teach us something none of us learned in school. Let's go back to the beginning. 8 months before that rain, Imani Blackwood was living in a 4th-floor walk-up in Reservoir Hill, Baltimore, working 2 jobs and dating a man who kept forgetting her birthday on purpose. By day, she was a legal translator, Korean to English, English to Korean, for a mid-sized immigration firm on Charles Street. She'd fallen into the language in undergrad at Morgan State, the way some people fall into religion, unexpectedly, then completely. Her professor, Dr. Yoon, used to tell her she had nunchi, the Korean word for reading a room, feeling what wasn't said. You listen with your whole body, Imani. That's rare. By night, she waitressed at a soul food spot called Miss Perline's, where the tips were good on Fridays, and the owner let her take home the cornbread that didn't sell. She was saving. That's what she told herself. Saving for what, she couldn't always say. A house, a trip, a version of her life where she got to breathe. The man was named Darius. He was 34, a personal trainer with a smile that had once made her forget her own name, and a Cash App request always locked and loaded. She'd covered his car note twice, his phone bill 4 times, the investment in his cousin's food truck that she never saw a receipt for. When she'd finally asked, softly, if maybe they could split something, anything, he'd looked at her like she'd spit on the flag. So it's like that now, Mani? You keeping score? She'd apologized. She'd apologized for asking to be treated fairly. Her mother, Delphine, called every Sunday from the group home in Towson, where the early onset Alzheimer's had put her at 58. Some Sundays, Delphine knew her. Some Sundays, she called her baby girl and asked when she was coming to pick her up. Imani paid the difference the state didn't cover, $2,200 a month, and never told Darius because Darius had opinions about black women being everybody's mule. Her younger brother Marcus was at Bowie State on a partial scholarship. She covered the rest: books, meal plan, the bus ticket home at Christmas. She was 29 years old, and she had never, in her entire adult life, spent money on herself without doing the math on somebody else first. The lie she believed, the one so deep she didn't know it was a lie, was that love was something you earned through payment, that if she just gave enough, covered enough, forgave enough, she would eventually become undeniable. Someone would finally choose her the way she kept choosing everybody else. The night everything cracked started ordinary. A Tuesday in March, cold rain. She came home from Miss Perline's at 11:45, feet screaming, and found Darius on her couch with a woman named Toya, whose lipstick was on Imani's coffee mug. He didn't even stand up. "Mani, before you trip." She didn't trip. She didn't scream. Something inside her that had been holding for a decade simply let go, quiet as a released breath. She walked to her bedroom, packed a duffel, and walked back out past both of them without a word. She slept in her car that night in the Miss Perline's parking lot. At 6:14 in the morning, her phone buzzed. An email from a Seoul-based firm she'd never heard of, Hansu and Partners. They needed a certified English-Korean legal translator, short-term contract, confidential client, 30 days, housing included. The number they were offering made her sit up so fast she hit her head on the sun visor. $90,000, American, for 30 days of work. She read it 4 times. She didn't know yet that the client had already asked for her by name. The plane landed at Incheon at 4:47 on a Thursday afternoon in April. Cherry blossoms were finishing their run, littering the airport curbs like pink snow. A driver was waiting for her with a hand-lettered sign, Ms. I. Blackwood. No car service logo, just a black sedan and a man in a gray suit who bowed exactly the right number of degrees. The apartment they put her in was in Hanam-dong, on the 17th floor, with a view of the Han River that made her sit on the floor and cry for reasons she couldn't name. The next morning, she was driven to an office building in Gangnam that had no signage. Floor 42. A conference room with a table long enough to land a small plane. And at the far end of it, alone, a man in his mid-30s reading a document with the stillness of somebody who'd learned young. That movement gets you noticed, and being noticed gets you killed. He looked up when she entered. He didn't stand. "Ms. Blackwood." "Mr. Kang Seong-jae." His English was almost accentless, the kind you only get from years abroad. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." He was beautiful in a way that felt like a warning. Sharp jaw, a small scar just above his left eyebrow, pale as an old letter. Eyes so dark the pupils seemed to eat the iris. He wore a black suit with no tie, and a watch that probably cost more than her mother's care for a year. The job, he explained, was translation, contracts, correspondence, a handful of meetings. Some of the work would be sensitive. Some of it she would translate and immediately forget. She would be paid $90,000 for 30 days. Housing, food, transportation, wardrobe, all covered. She would not leave the country during the contract. She would not discuss the work with anyone. "Why me?" she asked. "There are hundreds of Korean English legal translators. Most of them are Korean. Most of them are already here." Kang Seong-jae studied her for a long moment. "Dr. Yoon Ji-eun was my aunt," he said. "She spoke about one student the entire last year of her life. She said you listened with your whole body. She said you were the only American student she ever taught who understood Han without having it explained." Imani's breath caught. Dr. Yoon had died 2 years ago. She hadn't known the professor had family in Korea, let alone. "She left me her notes," he said quietly. "When I needed someone I could trust, yours was the only name in them." He slid a contract across the table. 30 pages, bilingual, immaculate. "Read it. Every line. Ask any question. If you sign, you start Monday. If you don't, the car will take you back to the airport tonight and you keep the retainer for your trouble." She read it. Twice. It was the cleanest contract she'd ever seen. And she read contracts for a living. There was one clause, though, that made her look up. Section 14. The client reserves the right to terminate with cause if the contractor's safety is compromised. My safety? Compromised how? For the first time, Kang Xiong-jai smiled. It was a small, tired thing. Ms. Blackwood, he said, I would prefer you never have to find out. But if you do, I need you to know that I will get you home. Alive! That's what Section 14 is for. She signed on Monday. She learned who he really was on Wednesday. It was the third meeting, a warehouse in Incheon, not an office. 3 men across the table from Kang Xiong-jai, all older, all wearing the kind of quiet that comes from having done things that can't be taken back. They were speaking in a fast, regional Korean, Busan dialect mostly, and they clearly didn't know the tall black woman in the corner understood every word. They called him Youngnim, older brother, the honorific used inside organized crime. They talked about shipments, not of goods, of people, young women from Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, being routed through a competitor's network into brothels in Osaka. They wanted Kang Xiong-jai's blessing to move against that competitor. They wanted his men, his guns. He listened. He didn't move. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped an octave. No, he said in Korean. You don't move on Choi until I say. And when we move, we don't just take his territory. We take his ledgers. Every girl on those ledgers goes home. Alive. Do you understand me? Hyung-nim, that's not... Do you understand me? They understood him. In the car afterward, Imani sat with her hands folded so tight her knuckles ached. Kang Xiong-jai watched the city slide past the tinted window for a long minute before he spoke. You understood everything. Yes. Dr. Yoon was thorough. Yes. He turned his head, looked at her fully for the first time all day. There was no apology in his face, and no pride either, just a strange, exhausted honesty. I inherited an organization I did not build, he said. My father built it. My grandfather built it before him. I have spent 7 years trying to turn it into something that hurts fewer people. I am not a good man, Miss Blackwood, but I am trying to be a less bad one. That is the honest answer to the question you have not asked. You're the boss of a Korean crime family. I am the head of the Kang Association, yes. And you brought me here to translate for the parts of my work that touch the legitimate world. Immigration paperwork for the women we recover. Legal filings for the businesses we are trying to make clean. Contracts with foreign partners who don't need to know my full biography. He paused. I told you the truth on Monday. I said your safety could be compromised. It could. Not by me, but by knowing me. The car stopped at a red light. Rain again. Always rain. You want to go home, he said. It wasn't a question. The car will take you to the airport tonight. You keep the 90,000. Section 14. No questions. No consequences. She thought about her mother's monthly bill, her brother's tuition, the Baltimore apartment that wasn't hers anymore, the couch with lipstick on the coffee mug. She thought about the way he'd said every girl on those ledgers goes home, alive. I signed a 30-day contract, Mr. Kang, she said quietly. I finish what I sign. He looked at her for a long time. Then let me be very clear about what you just agreed to. They went back to the Gangnam office. Not the penthouse. Not yet. He sat her down, not across from him, but beside him, at the corner of the long table, and for 2 hours he laid out the actual terms of her stay. He gave her a burner phone with 3 numbers. His second in command, a woman named Han Soo-min, and a lawyer in Los Angeles named David Aronson who had a Korean grandmother, spoke fluent Korean, and had extracted people from far worse situations than hers. If anything happens to me, Xiong-jai said, you call David. You do not call the police. Not here, not there. David has instructions and he has money. He will get you home. He gave her a safe in her apartment with a combination only she knew, and inside it a Korean bank card in her name loaded with $50,000, separate from her fee, labeled Emergency, Yours, no conditions. He gave her a driver, Officer Bayek, a former Seoul police detective who had left the force after his sister was trafficked and never recovered. Bayek would die for the work we're doing, Songjai said. He will drive you, and he will not touch you, and he will not report on you. He is yours. He gave her a rule, one rule. You do not attend anything that involves weapons, ever. If a meeting shifts in that direction, Beck pulls you out, no discussion. Your face is not to be in any room where blood is possible. And then, quietly, he gave her the last piece. There is a woman named Choi Yoon-ha. She runs the network I'm trying to dismantle. She has, at last count, 473 women logged in her ledgers across 3 countries. She knows I am coming for her. She has, in the past, targeted the people around her enemies, wives, sisters, translators. So I am a target. You could be a target. That is why I am telling you all of this instead of letting you find out in a parking garage. If you want to walk away tonight. Nobody in my organization will ever know your name. Imani sat with it, really sat with it. Not the rush of the money, not the pull of him, because she felt that, God help her, she felt it already. The quiet gravity of a man who had told her the whole terrifying truth instead of managing her. She sat with the 473 women. She thought about her mother, who used to work double shifts at Johns Hopkins housekeeping, and come home and still braid Imani's hair before bed. She thought about all the invisible labor of black women stretched across a world that took and rarely said thank you. She thought about girls in shipping containers. I'm not a hero, Mr. Kang. I didn't ask you to be. I asked you to translate. I want 3 things. He waited. 1. You call me Imani, not Ms. Blackwood. If I'm risking my life for your paperwork, you use my name. Imani. 2. Whatever we recover, the ledgers, the paperwork, I want to be the one who translates the immigration files for the American women, if there are any. I want my hands on those specifically. Done. 3. Her voice steadied. If, at any point, I tell you I want out, you don't argue. You don't negotiate. You don't offer me more money. You put me on a plane. Kang Seong-jae was quiet for a long moment. On my mother's grave, he said. Yes. She extended her hand across the table. He took it. His palm was warm and dry, and there was a callus on the outside edge, the kind you get from a specific grip on a specific kind of weapon, and she chose not to think about it. Day 1, she said. Day 1, he agreed. The next 22 days were a masterclass in something Imani didn't have a name for. She translated correspondence at dawn, in silk pajamas, drinking coffee stronger than any she'd had in her life, watching the Han River turn pink under the sunrise. She translated contracts in the afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the office floor because her back hurt from the chairs, and Seong-jae never once told her to sit properly. She translated interrogations, quietly, in a booth, into a headset, of men who had bought and sold women like meat, and she watched Kang Seong-jae not lay a hand on them and get more information out of them with his voice alone than any beating would have produced. She learned things about him in pieces. He'd studied economics at LSE. He read poetry, badly, in 3 languages. His father had been killed in front of him when he was 19, and he had run the association since he was 28. He had a scar on his ribcage he wouldn't explain, and a habit of eating standing up, like a man who'd learned young that sitting down at a table could be the last decision you ever made. She learned things about herself, too. She learned she was not afraid of him. That was the first surprise. She learned that when Officer Bayek drove her to a night market in Myeongdong, and she bought street food and ate it in the rain, laughing at nothing, she had not laughed like that in maybe 4 years. She learned on day 14 that Darius had been texting her burner-forwarded number 20 times a day. Baby, I miss you. Baby, that wasn't what it looked like. Baby, my car got booted. Can you send 400? She sat with the phone for a long time. Then she typed one message. Darius, lose my number. If you contact me again, I will file for the emotional distress and the $17,200 I have receipts for. Try me. She hit send. She blocked him. She felt something in her chest unhinge and fall away like an old door. That was the first boundary. The second came on day 19, when a courier arrived at the Gangnam office with a package for her, a small black box. Inside, a single dried flower, a white chrysanthemum, the kind Koreans use at funerals, and a note in careful English. Miss Blackwood, you are a long way from Baltimore. Go home while you still can. A friend. She brought it to Seong-jae without shaking. She hadn't expected that of herself, but her hands were steady. He looked at the flower. He looked at her. Choi, he said. I know. Beck will take you to the airport tonight. No. Imani. No. She set the box down on his desk. You said you wouldn't argue if I wanted to leave. You didn't say anything about staying. This is me staying, Seong-jae. This is me telling you I stay. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he hasn't allowed himself to want in a long time. Then we move faster. They moved faster. I need you to pause right here and do something for me. If this story is hitting you somewhere real, if you've ever been the woman who paid everybody's bills and got called selfish for wanting a plate of her own, comment day 19 below. That's the day Imani stopped running. I want to know who else in this comment section has hit their day 19. Now, back to Seoul. They moved on Choi's network on day 23, not with guns, with paper. Seong-jae's clean-side lawyers filed a coordinated set of complaints across 3 jurisdictions, Seoul, Manila, and, quietly, via David Aronson, the Southern District of New York. Imani translated the American filings herself, sitting in a conference room at 3 a.m, spelling the names of women she had never met, but whose passports she now held photocopies of. 41 of them were American citizens, 12 were minors. She translated their names into their own language. She wrote each one carefully, like a prayer she was allowed to say out loud. The raids happened at 5 a.m. on day 26, coordinated, legal, police, not muscle. Seong-jae had spent 2 years cultivating a specific anti-trafficking task force inside the Korean National Police Agency, feeding them intelligence in exchange for their willingness to move when he said move. That morning, they moved. 6 locations across Seoul and Busan, 3 in Manila, 2 in Los Angeles. Choi Eun-ha was arrested in her own apartment in Cheongdam-dong at 5:14 a.m., trying to shred documents she should have shredded months earlier. 281 women were recovered on the first day. By day 28, the number was 364. By day 29, it was 411. Imani watched the numbers climb on a whiteboard in the war room and felt something she had never in her life felt, the feeling of having built something that would outlast her. On day 29, she was asked to sit in on the recovery intake for the American women. 14 of them, brought into a bright, safe room in the U.S. Embassy's consular annex in Jongno. A social worker, a trauma nurse, a translator. Imani was the translator. The youngest was 17. Her name was Jasmine. She was from a town in Georgia Imani had never heard of. She had been missing for 11 months. When Imani sat down across from her and said gently, "Baby, you're going home?" Jasmine's face broke in a way Imani would carry for the rest of her life. But the payoff, the public one, came the next afternoon. The press conference was held in the KNPA's main auditorium. Seong-jae did not attend. His name would never appear in the coverage. That was the deal. But a woman named Prosecutor Yu, dressed in navy, stepped to the microphone and announced that Choi Eun-ha would be charged with 238 counts of human trafficking, and that the ring's operations had been dismantled, thanks to the coordination of international legal partners. Imani watched it on a monitor in the Gangnam office, standing beside Seong-jae. She did not cry. She had cried in the intake room the day before, cried until her whole body ached. She was empty of tears and full of something else, something like altitude. "You did this," she said quietly. "We did this." Seong-jae. "Imani." He turned to her. He didn't touch her. He hadn't touched her, not once, in 29 days. "When you go home," he said, "you will go home clean. Nothing about your work here will ever surface. Your name is in no filing. Your face is in no photograph. You will land in Baltimore with a check and a story you can never tell, and a life that is yours to build. That's what I wanted. I know. The rain started again outside the window. It had rained more in Seoul that month than it had in the last 3 Aprils combined. She would remember that detail forever. Day 30 is tomorrow, she said. Yes. Songjai? Tomorrow, Imani. Not tonight. Tonight you sleep. She went back to Hanamdong. She slept 12 hours. She did not dream. She woke on day 30 to a voicemail from her brother, Marcus, 22 years old, senior year at Bowie, 4 months from graduating. His voice on the recording was frantic, cracked, 12 seconds long. Moni, where you at? Ma's asking for you. Some man came by the group home yesterday saying he was your fiancé. Called himself Darius. Said he needed the emergency contact info updated. They almost gave it to him, Moni. What is going on? Her hands shook once, then they stopped. She called Marcus back. He picked up on the second ring. She talked him down. Then she called the group home director and had Darius formally banned from the property, and had her own contact information relogged. Then she opened her burner and stared at Darius's blocked number. She unblocked it. She called. He picked up like she'd never been gone. Moni, baby, I knew you'd come around. Darius, listen to me carefully because I'm only going to say this once. You went to my mother's group home. You used my mother's illness to try to get to me. There is a name for that, and it isn't love. It's stalking. It's elder endangerment. Manny, hold on. I have a lawyer now, Darius. His name is David Aronson. He's in Los Angeles, and he has a file with your name on it that includes the $17,200, the text messages, the group home visit, and a sworn statement from the director. You come near my mother again. You come near my brother again. You come near me again. And that file lands on a desk in Baltimore County. Do you understand me? Silence. Baby, you changed. No, I stopped shrinking. Those are not the same thing. Goodbye, Darius. She hung up. She blocked him again. This time she deleted the number from the block list too, because she didn't want to see the shape of it anymore. Then she sat on the edge of the bed in Hanamdong and let herself feel the size of what she had just done. She had chosen. Not the 29-year-old woman from Reservoir Hill who paid everybody's rent. Not the daughter who confused sacrifice for love. Not the girlfriend who apologized for asking to be treated like a human being. She had chosen the woman who translated names in the middle of the night so girls could go home. She had chosen the woman who did not flinch when a white chrysanthemum arrived in the mail. She had chosen herself. And the strange thing, the thing nobody had ever told her, was that choosing herself did not feel like a loss. It felt like coming inside from a rain she hadn't realized she'd been standing in for a decade. She showered. She put on the emerald green dress Han Soo-min had helped her pick out at a boutique in Cheongdam 3 weeks earlier. The first piece of clothing Imani had ever bought that made her feel expensive. She put on her mother's gold hoops, the ones Delphine had given her on her 16th birthday, back when Delphine still knew what year it was. Officer Bayek was waiting downstairs at 7. To the office, Miss Blackwood? To the penthouse, Beck. Mr. Kang asked me to come tonight. Before we go up to that penthouse, before the rain and the bank statement and the question, there is one more thing you need to know about Imani Blackwood. The morning of day 30, before Marcus called, before Darius, before any of it, she opened her laptop and did something she had been quietly building toward for 3 weeks. She had been drafting, in stolen hours between translation shifts, a proposal, not for Seongjai, for herself. A boutique bilingual legal translation practice, headquartered wherever she wanted, specializing in immigration and anti-trafficking work. She had spreadsheets. She had a client list. 6 firms in 3 countries who, over the last month, had quietly asked her, off the record, if she would work directly with them after her current contract ended. Word had traveled inside a very small, very specific world. She was, apparently, that good. Prosecutor Yu herself had left a message the night before. A retainer offer, 6 figures, annual, case by case. Imani had not told Seongjai about any of it. She sat with the numbers that morning in her Hannam apartment, with the Han River quiet outside, and she added it up. Her mother's care could be covered for the next 15 years. Marcus's remaining tuition, 3 semesters, paid in full. A down payment on a row house in Bolton Hill for herself. She'd been looking at listings at 3 in the morning, quietly, guiltily, like it was a thing she wasn't allowed to want. She could do all of it, on her own money, not Songjai's, not Darius's, hers. She was not going to that penthouse as a woman who needed him. She was going as a woman who could leave. That was the thing she had built in 30 days. Not a romance, not a rescue, a self. She looked at herself in the mirror before she went downstairs. Emerald green dress, gold hoops, her mother's face looking back at her in her own eyes. "Baby girl," she heard her mother say from a Sunday 6 years ago when Delphine had still known her name. "Don't you ever let a man pay for the woman you're supposed to become. You come into a room already paid up." Imani smiled at the mirror. "I'm paid up, Ma," she said out loud. Then she went to meet him. Which brings us back finally to the rain, to the penthouse, to the 13-digit bank statement, to Kang Songjai standing in his own doorway with rain on his shoulders, offering her a blank check to stay. "Name it," he said again. "Any number, anything." Imani folded the statement in half. She folded it again. She set it down on the walnut console table between them like it was a plate she was returning. "Songjai, look at me." He looked at her. "I don't want your $12 million. "Then tell me what you want." "I want you to close that account tomorrow morning. Every dollar in it goes to the recovery fund for the women we brought home. The American ones, the Filipino ones, the Vietnamese ones. All of them. There's a woman named Jasmine who's going to need therapy for the rest of her life. Put my name on nothing. Put the money there." He was quiet. "And then," he said. "And then," she said, "I want you to ask me a different question." He stepped closer. Not much. Just enough that she could see the exhaustion under his eyes, and the thing he had been holding back for 30 nights. "What question?" "Ask me if I want to stay because I choose to. Not because you paid me to. Not because you saved me. Not because I'm afraid to go home. Ask me if I want to build something with a man who tells me the truth even when it costs him. Ask me, Songjai, without the money in the room." The rain kept hitting the window. He nodded slowly. He seemed to gather himself. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. "Imani, will you stay?" "For how long?" "For as long as you want. A day, a year, the rest of our lives. On your terms. In your own apartment if you want. With your own work, your own money, your own name. I don't need to own you. I've never needed to own you. I just—" He stopped. He was, she realized, trying not to break. "I would like to know you. Slowly. Properly. As a man. Not as a boss." She let the silence hold. 6 months, she said finally. "I go home. I set my mother up. I graduate my brother. I start my firm. And then, Songjai, I come back. Not because you asked me to. Because I decided to. And we start on day 1. Real day 1. No contracts. No payment. Just 2 people who lived through a spring that changed them, seeing what they're made of on the other side." He exhaled. He almost smiled. "Day 1, he said. She reached across the console table and took his hand, the one with the fresh cut across the knuckles, and she held it, briefly, firmly, like an equal. "Day 1, Songjai." 6 months later, Imani Blackwood landed at Incheon on her own ticket, in her own coat, with her own business cards in her purse. There was no driver waiting. She had asked for none. She took the train into the city, watching the same cherry trees she'd watched in April, bare now against a November sky, and she felt the shape of her own life around her like a coat that finally fit. Kang Songjai was waiting for her at a small tea house in Ixundong. He stood when she walked in. He was, she noticed, nervous. She loved him a little for that. She had come back on her own terms. She had come back paid up. She had come back as the woman her mother had told her once to become. She didn't get a fairy tale. Fairy tales are for women who are waiting to be chosen. Imani chose herself first, and everything else, the man, the work, the life, arranged itself around that choice like iron filings around a magnet. If this story moved you, do 3 things for me right now. Comment paid up below so I know you finished. Share this with the woman in your life who is still confusing sacrifice for love. And subscribe, because next week we're telling another story about another woman who stopped shrinking. She didn't get a fairy tale ending. She got something better. She got herself back.